the front end. We've got more people joining, so just whilst people are coming in, I'll do some introductions. So we are here to discuss collaboration, partnerships, consortia. We're in a Zoom meeting this morning, so it is your choice whether you camera on or camera off, or a bit of both. You choose whatever you would like to do. There's no pressure either way. You will be automatically muted, but if you want to come off mute and ask a question, please don't worry about talking over me. If you want to be super polite, I think you can stick your hand up, but there's no need. We can have this as interactive as we want it to be. We are recording just the front end of the session, as I said, so I've got some slides to run through where we'll chat through the mechanics of collaboration. And the slides will be sent out to all registered attendees, but we'll stop recording when we get to the discussion and Q&A part so that people can speak freely. So what we'll cover in today's session is what is collaborative working, where do you start, what are the benefits of it, how to choose a partner, how you might structure a consortia or consortia, however you pronounce it. Thinking about the numbers, because they're important, and also the risk profile of it and the foundations to what good collaboration could be. My name is Gillian Askew. If you've not joined a Go for Growth session before, you might not know who I am, but I'm one of 3 co-founders of Go for Growth, and I am your host for this morning's session. But actually, I must give credit to Dr. Jane Lynch from Cardiff University, who has supported us in providing the materials and the insight and background into the session that we're now running independently from them. So thank you ever so much, Jane. These sessions wouldn't exist without the information that's come through Cardiff University. So hopefully that gives you also just some comfort in the background of it. So we're in until 11. If we finish a bit earlier, we can give you some time back. That's not a problem. And I will just try and run through the top end quite quickly, but do shout if you've got any questions. Part of why we're here actually is to introduce our businesses to other businesses. Finding a partner to collaborate with can often be the most challenging part of what we do. So if you would like to, in the chat, and again, you don't feel you have to, but if you'd like to, enter into the chat your name, your business name, what sector you're in, for example, where you are, or where you might be looking for a partner. And if you want people to be able to get in contact with you, pop your contact details in there. And if you want to, a brief overview of what your business does. Anything you share in the chat, we're happy to share with other registered attendees so that you can perhaps carry on that conversation outside of here. But again, it's totally up to you. If you don't want to, please don't feel you have to. And we won't share anything without people's permission. So what you do put in the chat in terms of your business details, we will share if that's okay with you. So the aim of today's session, we're going to be talking about partnerships, collaboration, possibly forming a formal consortia of some kind. We'll focus on working with other businesses to secure opportunities when that might be an appropriate route to take, especially thinking about public sector. And so I think there are some key questions that you would naturally ask yourself at the front end. And just to say, you might hear this as a theme coming through. Go for Growth is actually a collaboration, and we are a special purpose vehicle. That's the model that we've taken. I'll cover a little bit of that today. But Go for Growth is a consortia. So we are a collaboration between 2 other businesses, and those 2 other businesses do continue to operate in and of themselves. So we are a special purpose vehicle in Go for Growth. So we have lived and breathed this process ourselves as businesses. So some of the questions we asked ourselves, and you will likely ask yourself, is this part of your growth plan? Are you trying to actively grow your business? And are you thinking that collaboration might be a route to growth? Have you considered collaborating with other small business leaders, sector enterprises, third sector enterprises, charities, that kind of thing? And it might seem like a strange question, especially as this is an event dedicated to working with others, but it can sometimes feel like it's in the too difficult space, that collaboration piece, or actually it can be difficult to wrap our heads around how it will affect our ability to compete if we're not working alone any longer. So I think they are still, although they might seem like obvious questions, important questions to ask ourselves. And do we know what a consortium is? And in this case, what we mean by a supplier consortium is that more than one organisation is coming together. So some consortia might involve up to 7, 8, potentially even more organisations of different sizes. So it is possible to go beyond just one partner, but usually we see collaboration between 2, maybe 3 businesses, but usually a couple. And I think then the final question that you might ask yourself is, are you trying to improve your chances of securing higher value public sector contracts? So there is a real drive from the public sector at the minute to access the whole of the marketplace and to make it as easy as possible for small businesses to access the public sector opportunities that are out there. But it does remain, and I think it is a fact at the minute, although the tide of change is upon us, it does remain more difficult, I think, for smaller organisations, micro businesses, small voluntary sector organisations, to meet the selection criteria sometimes, and to certainly go for some of those bigger contracts unless they're working with others. So one of the reasons that you might be thinking about collaboration is around securing higher value public sector contracts, as well as spreading risk, for example, and bringing new skills into your organisation to help you compete. Welcome to the person who's just joined. We are recording the front end of this session, but we will stop recording when we get to the discussion point. So, continuing on that theme for key questions, we'll think about the motivation for this. So why would we collaborate? And have we done our options appraisal? What are the other options to help my business grow if I don't choose to collaborate? What's the opportunity cost of that? If I don't do it, what does it mean? And there are some myths around collaboration in that it's super easy to do, that anybody can be collaborative. And actually, in theory, that's true. In practice, in business, it's a different context, I think, to collaborating in our personal lives, where actually it might come just a little bit more naturally to us as people. And it is a very human thing that we're doing, collaborating, and it's definitely not insurmountable, but it just probably requires some thought. So it requires senior level buy-in in your organisation. It requires investment in time, especially in those upfront stages. So it's really important to understand why your business would seek to collaborate. What's in it for you? What am I going to get out of this collaboration? What do I want, need, and must get out of this collaboration? And there are some reasons. So joint working might be part of your strategy already. So you might have already decided as part of your strategic plan that working with others is the right way forward. That might lead you to new supply networks, for example, or new business opportunities, might help you fill a skill that you don't already have by pulling that in through a collaborative arrangement. So it could help you with logistics, for example, it could help you with IT. And so they're pretty common reasons why we see people wanting to collaborate. You would also think, I guess, in terms of what your current mission is. So what are my organization's goals? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are the opportunities that collaboration would really help us to capitalize on? How will a partnership really genuinely help my business to grow? And then thinking, actually, are we ready to collaborate? Have we got the culture in place that is open enough to be able to embrace this collaboration? And I guess certainly what Jane has taught me over the years is that collaboration, and what I've seen in practice actually in Go for Growth, is that collaboration is, I guess, a process of managing relationships. So collaborative working is a big relationship management structure, and it requires us to manage relationships perhaps in a different way, and it requires a certain set of behaviours to do that. So from a cultural side of things, it's really important to consider how we might do that, how we might be prepared for collaboration, and that senior level buy-in is really important to that. I think, and depending on the size of your organisation, how small or big you are, if you're a larger size organisation without that senior level buy-in, it's probably unlikely that the right amount of time would be able to be committed to make the collaboration work. So think about whether you've got the culture and the motivation and the commitment to it. And then in terms of structure, we'll talk a little bit about it anyway, the different types of collaboration that you can take. There are different options, and I'll go through a couple of them shortly. And then in terms of time, Cardiff University and Dr. Jane Lynch have always said, if you're thinking of collaborating, then you would need to start those conversations at least 6 months in advance of a contract opportunity becoming available, purely because of the time it takes to form a relationship. We know in life in general that relationships take time. Trust is a core part of a collaboration, and trust in and of itself takes time to develop. So you need to have those conversations as early as you can. If you try and rush it, it's unlikely, not impossible, but it's unlikely that you'll be as successful as you could be in the longer term. So we would always encourage that you would think about this as a long-term strategy, not a short-term thing. And in the public sector, that's really important. When the competition or bid clock starts ticking, you invariably have somewhere around 35 days in order to bid. And I have seen it myself where I've seen an opportunity, but because of the type of opportunity, the size of it, the scale of it, and without it having a lot structure, for example, Go for Growth couldn't bid it on its own. It would need to be in a consortia. And because Go for Growth hadn't got that consortia in place, we didn't have time to do it when the competition was live. So I think it's thinking about those things as a long-term strategy. And then some ideas of the benefits. What will you get out of it? There is that old saying, isn't there, that 2 heads are better than 1. And actually, depending on how small you are, you might be a self-employed person, a sole trader, a micro business, 0 to 9 employees. Being self-employed or small can sometimes be a really lonely place, particularly as we are still coming out of the pandemic from an economic regeneration perspective. So we're thinking about, what can I do differently with my business so that I don't get affected by those big volatile, perhaps unknown things that happen like COVID? How can I build in that resilience? And is working with somebody else a way of doing that? And it is an opportunity to look outside of our businesses. So we think back to 2007, 2008, that financial crash of the third quarter in 2007, early 2008. You'd see signs on businesses on the high street saying closed due to recession. And actually, all of those closures and pandemic closures, actually, in a practical sense, they were closures due to cash flow problems. We didn't see the recession coming. Unlike COVID, we didn't see COVID coming. I guess hindsight is 2020, right? So if we look back, we might have been able to see some signs, but we just didn't anticipate how it would affect us. And I think what that's taught us is that we can't be complacent in our businesses. We have to look outside of our business and be very aware of the macro environmental challenges that could potentially risk our business, and think about whether or not collaboration could be an answer to creating that resilience. And one of the greatest challenges, I think, in collaboration is about who might be the right partner. And actually, post-COVID, it's even harder, I think, to meet and build relationships with other businesses when we're living so much of our lives now in the metaverse. You know, we live in a virtual world. This session today is a virtual session. So, you know, we're trying an event like this to see if it will help. It's the 3rd time we've done it. We hope that it will help us build relationships and learn more about collaboration. Hopefully you will, if you do decide to introduce yourselves on the chat, you'll come away with some virtual business cards that might go on to be a potential relationship in the future. If that does happen, do let us know. So we'll think a little bit about how we choose a partner. And we will always want to think carefully about who we want to work with in the future, and importantly, what value that business is going to bring to our business. And we will be mutually thinking about these things. So as that conversation goes on in your organization, it will be going on in your potential partner's business as well. So what you can see on screen is the SWOT matrix. I'm sure you're familiar with it. If you're not, it's about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's one of the most widely used frameworks, but it's also really good for understanding collaboration. It can be a really good tool for starting off a collaborative partnership arrangement. And so basically what you would be doing is identifying, first of all, as individual organisations, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And effectively, your strengths become your opportunities, and your weaknesses, if not addressed through this preparing to collaborate, they will inevitably become threats to the collaboration, to the relationship. So ideally, when you're thinking about who you might partner with, you're looking at a complementary set of strengths so that you don't end up in that competitive space. And you want to try and exploit your strengths to become opportunities. So you'll be needing a partner who will help you address some of your weaknesses. Otherwise, it will cause problems later on. If you're collaborating with the same strengths, you could end up, as I said, competing against each other rather than cooperating with each other. So you can use this kind of matrix to help you figure out what you would be bringing and what you want another organisation to bring and how you do that. So in Go for Growth, for example, there are 3 co-founders and 2 businesses. So Net Positive Futures are experts in sustainability, ESG, social value, and carbon reduction. And they have been working in the public sector for many years. All Things Procurement, the other business, is an expert in sustainable procurement, but with a real focus on the procurement element. And so we have our principal knowledge sets were complementary: social value, sustainability, carbon, and procurement. Our secondary knowledge sets were complementary. So I understand, and my colleagues understand, about sustainability and social value, but procurement is our expertise. They understand procurement, and social value and sustainability is their expertise. And so our SWOT matrix helped us understand how we complement and how we get the best out of our 2 businesses as we came together to be Go for Growth. So the types of organisation, the types of collaboration, that you might look at, there are different models, and we should think up front about how we structure a consortium, how we structure that collaboration. If we're thinking about working with more than one organisation to make us contract ready, and to help us open up those opportunities to grow our business, then there is a particular model that could be useful called the lead body model, and that's what you can see on screen. It's very well known and very well used in industry, and it is often used in public sector. And it is a recommended model. So the University of Bristol and Cardiff have come together to put this together on screen. But the Institute of Collaborative Working is a really good repository for having a look at information. But effectively, the reason why it's a good thing to think about is it gives that bit of structure that we need. It speaks the language of collaboration. So in collaboration, people say that where it can often go wrong is that there's an imbalance of power. You've got somebody that always makes the decisions, and often that might be the people who have the highest turnover, but effectively you will have a set of decision makers or a decision maker, everybody else follows. With the lead body model, it dispels that. What you'll have is a lead body organisation. It might be the organisation with the highest turnover, but it doesn't matter actually, because when it comes to making decisions, you have a steering group. And one member from each organisation is on the steering group, and everybody has a vote. So everybody is equitably, equally responsible for making decisions about what the consortium gets involved in and how it's run, how it's managed, etc. And that's really important when you're thinking about the cost of that. So overhead costs, for example, if you're looking to tender for public sector contracts, the public sector need to award to one legal entity. And so that effectively would be the lead body in this model. And there'd be administrative overhead costs to that being the lead body. And that shouldn't necessarily be absorbed in an imbalanced way. The cost could be spread then and split between each of the consortium members, but the steering group would be the group that would determine how those costs are shared out. And so there's you kind of get a feel for that lead body model and how you set it up. So you have one legal entity that becomes who actually puts the bid in and who the contract would be with. But through that public sector bidding process, you do identify that you're bidding as part of a consortium, and those other organisations become named in that bid. And you would all fill out a selection questionnaire. In terms of if you want more information, you can go to the Welsh Government website. So you can, if you type into those well-known search engines, Joint Bidding Wales, you'll find the guidance there. There's some really good guidance, actually. And the Institute of Collaborative Working, as well as I've said, is a good place to go. But it's really important to think about that relationship between the lead body organisation. They become the central point of contact. So you have a single point of contact going into a contract, the main point of contact. But ultimately, for the rest of the decisions that happen across the consortium, no matter how many members there are, that needs to be shared and agreed equally. And that's why the steering group is so important. And then I'll pick actually the SPV, the special purpose vehicle model. It's probably more for collaborations that have been well established. And it's when a consortium becomes a legal entity in and of itself. Now, what I will say is that Go for Growth went straight to the SPG. So we didn't work on lead body model to start with. Perhaps we did for about a year before we incorporated an SPV. So we were really quite quick to create that legal entity in and of itself. So each individual organisation continues trading. So all things procurement and net positive futures, they continue trading in their own right. And Go for Growth becomes a business that it then runs its own payroll, it manages its own costs, it makes its own invoices, etc., etc. It's been really effective for us, and the 3 co-founders of it are named directors. We did take legal guidance from the Federation of Small Businesses and our respective local chambers of commerce. We did that both independently and collegiately. So we did that collaboratively and both independently. And we did think about some of the legal elements around what might we do if this doesn't work? So we're setting up a legal entity. What happens if we can't make this work? And that might be because the business opportunities aren't there, but it also might be a breakdown in relationship. So it is important to think about your divorce before you get married. And we put our equivalent of prenups in place. So there are things that you can do. So God forbid, one of our directors is no longer with us, or more hopefully, somebody wins the lottery and decides they want to go lie down in the Bahamas. What happens to their shares in this legal entity that we have, that we've crafted over the years? And so, if God forbid that's about an estate, what we wanted to make sure was that our shares didn't just go into our estate, that they actually went to the other co-founding members of the business. And so thinking about those difficult, thorny, and frankly, morbid conversations can be really hard. We had some really tough conversations in the beginning of Go for Growth, but they were the right thing to do. And our relationship is far stronger and better and more effective for having those things. Actually, you can put your infrastructure in place and then you can just get on with the business of getting on. And it's really useful. And that's especially important if you are setting up a legal entity. So crunching the numbers, before we start, we should do our sums. That makes good business sense. Get yourself it doesn't have to be anything particularly sophisticated, actually. An Excel spreadsheet, thinking about the overhead costs, what they might look like to set your consortia up and running, what insurances might you need, where will you bank, have you got a bank account, are the invoices, and if you've got an SPV, then you will have a separate business account, but actually, are you using the business banking account of the lead body? You probably will. All of those things. What will it cost you to market this? Your time, how much labor are you putting into it? Think about those things. And it's really important to do that at the outset, because they're difficult conversations to have later on if you haven't done that and done that well. So managing or reducing risk, there are risks to collaborative relationships. There are risks to any types of relationships. And although it says on the screen ISO 44001, the standard for managing collaborative relationships, I'm not suggesting for a second that everybody needs to become accredited to that international standard. But there is an awful lot of information in it that could help us. So the reality is that most organisations start to collaborate together. They start with where it says working together. And then they think, well, we've got this project, let's get up and running. Who do we need around the table? Let's get started, and off they go. And what they think about is, why do we need to collaborate? Or what they don't start to think about is why we need to collaborate, why collaboration is the right vehicle. And they don't, not everybody stops to think about, what are the individual objectives of each organisation in this collaboration? What are our values? What's our vision? And if we don't think about those things at the outset, it can come as a nasty shock later on when you find out that actually one of you is striving to reduce costs in the business, the other one is looking to add value and increase quality. So little contradictions like that can become a much bigger problem if we don't understand them at the start. Another big area is knowledge. So what do we know and what do we need to know? Have we got everything we need? In day-to-day life today, and we are part of this metaverse now, we're surrounded by big data. And the reality is we probably share data for data's sake sometimes, and we don't actually have the time to analyze that data. If in the consortium you decide that you'll be sharing data and that's going to be a core part of what you do, you need to think about how that's going to help and support the collaboration going forward. So think about the types of data that you'll need, when you'll need it, have a discussion about the willingness of other partners to share their information. And it's really important that you can be quite strategic and work in a confidential way, to be respectful of what needs to stay within the collaboration and what is a matter of public record, for example. It's important to think about things like intellectual property. So if you're setting up a consortia, if you don't talk about who owns what intellectual property at the start, what happens to it at the end of a project or at the end of the life of this collaboration, how will you deal with it at the end? That can always become a problem. You've got cybersecurity things to think about at the minute. You might have incompatible platforms. Your systems might not be able to talk to each other. Don't underestimate how much of this we should do before we get to the working together bit. But then once we've got together, we are working together, we are creating value. It obviously doesn't stop there. We need to think about those ongoing communications. How are we going to talk to each other? If we're fortunate enough to win the contracts, how are we going to manage that? Have we got our plan in place? When are we going to meet? How are we going to talk? What's realistic? What's feasible? How many people? You can't manage everything by committee. So what are we going to do? When we're creating that value, who owns that? Who owns that ongoing IP? You've got foreground IP and background IP. Where do they sit? What happens ultimately at the end of it? And of course, you will, as I talked about, think about the divorce before the marriage. You will think about your exit strategy. Now, we set Go for Growth up with no end date in mind, but we did have a conversation about what are the triggers that we see or we are looking for to tell us whether this isn't working for whatever reason. So we had a discussion about how we might disengage and what the process would be for talking about that, and also for preventing it. We want Go for Growth to be an ongoing business, obviously, so we don't want that to be a thing, but we do know that we've got our process agreed if God forbid we ever get there. So there are some things that underpin collaboration. I've just got a couple more slides and then we'll get into some discussions. But Cardiff University, the Cardiff Business School and Jane Lynch, what they think the fundamentals of good collaboration are, and I wholeheartedly agree with these things. Top of the list is leadership. You need collaboration champions. If you're a sole trader or a micro organization, that might be okay because it's just you or there's just a few of you. If you're a larger organization, those champions in your organization would be really important. That single point of contact, though, somebody who really understands the benefits of collaboration, why you want to collaborate, what's in it for you, that's all important. Don't be put off by those early conversations that I've just talked about. They are awkward, they are challenging, they are difficult, but they will pay dividends in your relationship. And think about your communication. So as we all know, it is impossible to guarantee that the email that you send will be received in the manner that you intended it when you press send. And we all know, if you're a small business trying to win new work outside of competition spaces and even inside of it, sometimes getting no response can be the worst thing in the world. Being ghosted in business, I think, is almost worse than being ghosted in your personal life. So if you are thinking about your communications, how you cooperate with each other, what those values are, communications need to be right in the middle of all of that. Be honest with yourselves, be open, be clear, not defensive. Those values, those behaviours really make a difference to how the consortia will work and how it will run. And it is about exhibiting those behaviours from day one. And of course, we need to put that commitment in place, and that any relationship takes effort, and that needs to be tangible effort, proportionate and equitable effort from all parties. But we do see the triple win here. So there's a win for us as a business, there's a win for our collaborative partner, and there's a win for the end user of whoever will ultimately buy our products and services as well. So there's lots of opportunities to be gained from collaboration. But if we think about that leadership in a little more detail, so there is a link here that you can go to around thought leadership insights. The collaborative leadership is essential in the future. It is key to adapting and addressing the increasingly complex challenge of business. Opportunities in the public sector is a real drive, especially with the regulations, to make sure that opportunities are open and accessible to all. But there is also a truth that there are some really big opportunities out there where collaboration would really open so many more doors for smaller organisations. But that leadership is going to be the difference between making it work and it not working. So thinking about those behaviours, those competencies, thinking about what tech you need to underpin it and help run it, and working with people that you trust in a partnership way, thinking about your collective experience rather than working in isolation and just being two businesses. I very much feel like a part of a team in Go for Growth, and we are a sum of all of our parts, and that really follows through with our joint values, who we were as humans, and what we bring from our two respective businesses into Go for Growth. But of course, there are challenges. It would be remiss of me to ignore the fact that there are challenges. There are challenges in collaboration, just as there are in anything else. If it isn't managed well, that in and of itself creates a risk. I think, particularly about your client whose contract it is that you might be fulfilling through consortium working, they need, and the way we sort of think about it is, your proposal and your delivery of that proposal should be as seamless as if you are one organisation. So in a consortium, particularly if you're thinking about public sector work, be thinking as one business, be moving as one business, whether you're a legal entity, SPV, or you're using the lead body model, both can help you do that in a really effective way. And really importantly, actually, if you use a loose, informal structure for managing a consortium, it will almost certainly cause problems later on. We talked about 6 months to get ready for collaboration. So, there's no better time than now to really start thinking about those strategic things. The biggest amount of time you'll probably spend is finding the right partner. So don't underestimate that, and don't choose somebody just for the sake of it. Spend time thinking about who the right partner would be, what they would need to have in their toolkit in order to be right. So, and actually, just as an aside, Jane told me that in the automotive sector, traditionally, they might spend 6 years trying to find a partner. So I'm not suggesting that we need to when we're smaller businesses, but there is that message there that it takes time. Communication I've talked about already, it's really important, and think about how you will deal with finance, insurance, and TUPE. I don't know if you are aware of what TUPE is, but it's the Transfer of Undertakings and Protection of Employment legislation. If you're bidding for service-based contracts, there could be TUPE at play in those contracts. So in whatever model you're collaborating in, you would need to think about actually who takes the strain of that TUPE transfer of people and their pensions and their terms and conditions, etc. And then again, contingency, what happens if one of the consortium member pull out of the contract or they fail to deliver? What will you do with that? What's your plan B? And thinking longer term, how you might legalise your consortium. You might start with lead body model for a 4-year contract, for example. It works super well, and you might decide to form an SPV at that point. So I'm going to pause the recording. So let me stop recording now.